Scott, welcome to Lockdown Sessions. How are you?
Love it. Happy to be here.
You're over in DC, an executive coach working with leaders. We were just talking before, really helping them focus on their communication as leaders, how to enhance their interactions with others to garner more. And of course, as a leadership coach, you're working one-on-one with people, but I know you also work within teams as well from a facilitation point of view. So Scott, listen, these lockdown sessions, they're 30-minute sort of bite-sized chats. They're unedited. So I've only sworn twice in 70 odd episodes. So
All right.
don't go down that route. But look, starter for 10. What have you been observing based out there in the US as you are with your clients? What have you been observing and learning over lockdown that's really kind of landed with you and you thought, note to self, that's an interesting development or an interesting learning point?
Sure. Well, my clients are all over the world, so my learning and my observations are not just related to clients here in the US, but I would say that all of the clients it's the first time they've had this pause where no matter where they are, so one powerful aspect of what we've been going through as a world, it's the first time that we understand what somebody else is feeling and living with on a daily basis. And that's powerful. And without having distractions or even being in lockdown, we've really had that time, that moment, that pause to ask ourselves those important questions, those difficult questions that maybe we've never asked ourselves before. Who do I want to be? Who do I want in my life? What is it I want to do? Where do I want to take from a personal perspective? Where do I want to take my business? What opportunities are there? And when I'm working with business leaders and those in leadership roles in organizations, so many times they might have said, we can't do this because. Well, now it's become, we have to do this because it's about survival for many.
Yeah.
And sure, there are those sectors, those organizations that are thriving, but there are many that are having a very challenging time. So what I've learned through this personally is when I went into it, I said, okay, I thought it'd be over in 3 months. Quite honestly, I figured by July, by August, we're done, business back to normal. Well, clearly that's not the case. It's now December. And I wanted to come out of it better than before. So I went into it with a learner's mindset, with a beginner's mindset. And I had one of the ways that I did this was with languages. I love languages. I already speak Arabic and Italian. But I said, I'm going to level or get better in both of those languages. So I hired personal tutors for both. And I have been improving my Arabic and Italian skills. That's just one thing. So really to have a learner's mindset. And I've been encouraging that with my clients, to go into this and to continue to go through this, saying, okay, now we've been through 6 months of this. How are you going to make the next 6 months the best of your life? Because the first 6 months, it was really an unknown for us. We didn't know what was happening. There was so much every day we were getting different information. We didn't know what was happening. Well, the next 6 months are pretty predictable. We know what lockdown's like. We know what COVID is or could be like. We have people around us that sadly we've lost that have had it. Maybe we've had it. Maybe our family members have had it. So how can we make the next 6 months the best?
I love how you go into it with a learning mindset. I considered learning a new language, chose not to. My desire to learn one was trumped by my lack of desire to actually learn one. But I love how you looked at upskilling, and I think there's something in that. When you talk about the way in which people approached it. So you were looking at it. How do we come out of this better than we go in? And I think that's a really interesting point for businesses as well, because a lot of businesses, the word pivot came up, didn't it? A lot,
Yes.
How a business is going to pivot. And I heard a lot of people misquoting Darwin. It's survival of the fittest, they said. And it's like, that's not what Darwin said. He actually said it's the survival of the most adaptable. And that leans straight into what you're saying there about, how can I change because of what's going on? And so if we could start with leaders, you've got a global perspective on leaders. How do a group of leaders change their perspective? What does that change of perspective look like for a leader? So they can go in with a growth mindset, if we use the overused phrase a little bit there.
Sure. Well, I think it's asking what's possible. It's committing to exploring possibilities. And like I said, many would say, no, we don't do it that way. We can't do it that way. Well, now it's let's consider everything. So being open, having that open mind, and really embracing innovation and seeing where it will take them. And as I say to many leaders, don't try to do it yourself. That's where we need to leverage the power of our team and the expertise of our team. Go to your employees, sit down with them individually as a group. What ideas do you all have? What do you think we can do? I'll share a success story. This happened middle of April, right at the beginning of COVID. It's with a company that I work with in Africa. And it's a manufacturing company. And the commercial manager who I'm coaching still, he started having an idea. He's on Facebook like we all are. He's on WhatsApp and Instagram. And he started thinking, what would it look like if we start opening up an online sales channel? They'd never done that before. Everything they did was B2B or B2C, but it was through the relationship. It wasn't online. They created, for a very, very low cost, an online sales channel selling through WhatsApp, through Instagram, through Facebook. These products that they make, which you typically wouldn't expect would be sold online, but everybody's in lockdown.
Right.
So why not? Now you're in an African, I won't say the country, but you're in an African country where technology is not all that prevalent, but hey, everybody still has a smartphone.
Yeah.
From the first week, it was in profit mode, and it's become a very successful, you could say, profit center within that organization. Cost nothing.
Yeah.
So that's one example of innovation. And no, we don't do that. Probably we don't sell online, right? Maybe it was never needed before, but he was able, through the coaching and through some experimentation and through talking to his team and engaging his team and utilizing the expertise of his team, they created it very quickly, and now it's working really well.
I think there are some fabulous stories of where teams have leveraged that collective intelligence across the team. I think the top end leaders realize that it's not showing tremendous vulnerability by them talking to their teams and not having all the answers themselves. Because
right.
I don't know about you, but I have felt this is an I don't know world. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know when we're going to go back and do this. I don't know when I'm going to travel. So actually, what can I do now? Mm-hmm. And when you talked before about options, I suppose that instantly gets me thinking, a lot of leaders are stuck in this role of having to have all the answers, having to be very kind of, cerebral about it. They're the leader. Have you seen movement in leaders moving away from kind of being, overtly tactical and strategic? Because quite honestly, if you've got a strategic plan that goes beyond 3 months, you're on your own in today's world, right? I mean,
right.
3 months is a long strategic plan to have right now.
Yeah.
So how have leaders been moving away from just, being the tactical and being the strategic direction and still growing in this kind of innovative, collaborative way you describe?
Well, it's a great question, and it takes time, right? The change takes time. They've operated for years this way. And one of the things I think happened was this was such a game changer in a bad way that they realized they didn't have the answers. None of us have ever been through this before. They had no choice but to almost throw their hands up and say, okay, I need help. Let's try to figure this out. And through allowing themselves to be vulnerable, not only in the coaching session, but also then taking that vulnerability and going to their team, they've found some great options, like what I just described with that success story. They also have started to realize that doing it, like as you said, a 3-month plan, forget it, and don't even think about a 5-year plan at this point.
Oh, right.
You can have an idea, but don't even think about it. Let's not put any effort in that right now.
Right.
They've started to embrace the unknown a lot more, and they realize that by asking questions to their team and engaging their team, it's making it much easier for them to navigate, to lead through this period of unknown, because they're not doing it all alone. And that's what I think was the biggest thing before, is many felt that they had to do it on their own. and they couldn't ask for help, and now they really had no option because this was so different.
When we first started talking together, and you and I are going to be working on a coaching program next year with leaders out in the
Right.
US. One of the things that really struck me about the way you operated was you talked a lot about being heart-centered, and I wondered where that plays a part during a pandemic, where psychological safety, nervousness, that kind of disconnection that we have from our peers, our team members. Have you seen a greater movement towards kind of more heart-centered leadership, a leadership with compassion, or even just maybe not getting too caught up in the kind of, again, the tactical approaches of kind of very much head-based, values-based leadership? What have you noticed?
Yeah, I think what the biggest thing is, because this is so different, this environment, they had no choice but to consider options. And they had, many of the leaders I've worked with have gotten success, and they're successful, but they realize as they look back that they've done it the hard way, and that a lot of their success is probably not going to be sustainable going forward.
Right.
So there had to be an easier way. Some of them, for example, were too micromanaging. They grew up in the organization and they didn't have anybody around them to share perspective with them. They started coaching and they realized, wow, I can actually do it this way, or this is an option. And then just being okay to, as you said before, show vulnerability was a big deal. So they started recognizing, and they continue to recognize, that if they connect first with themselves, and that's what we do in many of the sessions, is I'll say, well, tell me about, how does it feel? What's your first intuition? What's your first insight with that? And I can't tell you how many times they will tell me after the fact, months later, I did this, but I really shouldn't have, and I had a feeling.
Feeling, yeah.
And I say, oh,
Other word than the feeling.
What'd you do with that feeling? Oh, come on, I didn't do anything with that feeling. It was just a feeling. Well, that's the thing. It's not just a feeling.
Yeah.
There is some real intelligence there, and we can leverage the intelligence of our heart and the intelligence of our body, really our gut, our heart, and learn from that. And I think many of them, because this is such a different environment, they have become much more receptive to considering alternatives.
I suppose intuitively, my question then follows on of, not everybody's going to trust their heart in business.
Correct.
Do you get pushback when you start to talk to leaders?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they said, because they feel like they compartmentalize, right? They feel like that doesn't belong in business.
Right.
And so we'll go through some different scenarios, and I'll ask them, a question, for example, because I might know the CEO of the company in one situation, and I know that person is radically different than the person I'm working with. Well, tell me, why do you enjoy working with your CEO? Yes, I do. Well, why is that? Because he cares about me. He asks questions. He's really into not only the business and the results, but he's also into me as a person. He wants to understand more about me as a leader. And this is a high-level leader. And I said, so what about you and your team? Well, he doesn't do that.
Right.
He's starting to, right? He's starting to. One of my clients said that through the coaching, he realized that he had been hiding as a leader. He thought he had to be hard. He thought he had to be from the mind all the time, very practical, very strategic. He couldn't show, not so much compassion, but in a sense compassion, but he couldn't make that connection.
Yeah, it's a sensitivity. It's a sensitivity.
It's a sensitivity, absolutely. And look at, and a lot of my clients are men at this particular moment, and I've seen this more with men. In the sense, nobody really taught us how to do that, quite honestly, right? In many cultures, we haven't learned how to do that. So he started realizing that once a person comes back from vacation, how was your vacation? How's your family? Did you enjoy the trip? Simple things. I said they have to be just simple questions. And I would do 360-degree interviews. I did them in January, July, and December. It was a one-year coaching program last year. The feedback was amazing over the period of time. From the beginning, you had this person that was really closed, very commanding, very controlling, got results, got them the hard way.
Yeah.
Certainly didn't create any environment of engagement with the team. By July, things were shifting. By December, totally different person. And he realized in his year on reflection, I'd been hiding as a leader. I didn't know myself.
Well, fantastic insight for them and also
Yeah,
for the team.
for the team.
I guess there's probably a leap of faith, is there, in getting to that point. As a leader myself, I follow the path of compassion, so I follow my heart to a degree, and I trust in that intuitive response I get in situations. And then there are those moments when I feel as though I have to not trust my emotion. I have to then weigh that up and maybe lend myself to getting more data points. How do people find the right balance? Because it's never extremes, right?
Never.
The world
Right.
isn't that binary.
Right.
So how do you move someone from total strategic thinker, heartfelt connection? How do they kind of find their way back into a middle ground, or do they not? Do they end up sitting on the extreme end and thinking, nah, it's all heart-based now?
That doesn't work either, right? And you just described that. That doesn't work. So we'll talk about the ones that are really the most, I don't want to use the word caustic, but the ones that have no connection. They're hard. They get success, the team, but it's not sustainable. They're probably 80 to 90% in their head. Right. The goal is to create some sort of balance, and I like to say there's a bridge between the two. So let's start here. Let's start in our heart or start in our gut, and let's start to just feel or intuit what's our feeling towards that. What insights, what perceptions are coming towards that to us about that decision. They know, when they're considering hiring somebody for a position, they intuitively know after the interview, even before the interview sometimes, if that person is potentially the right candidate. And then you go to your head and you take that and you start to say, okay, I feel this, I need this. Then there is this give and take. We have to kind of go back and forth on that bridge between the two and see where it is. But you think about a performance review or even a discipline, right? When somebody's giving somebody bad news, you have to be in your head. You have to know this is what we're doing. This is what we expected. This is what didn't happen. This is what we needed, and this is what the repercussion is going to be, and this is where we want to go with it. But you do that with compassion. You do that with empathy. You can still leverage the heart, but get the message across. And
it's so interesting listening to you, because of course we were chatting offline a little bit beforehand, weren't we, about the political leaders we've been observing this year globally, and
it's quite a show,
right? And those who have led from a point of compassion are the ones that are embraced so much more by their public, and those that are derided are the ones that either fake empathy or don't even try and fake it.
Right. Well, that's a key point right there. Is that I'll tell leaders, you've got to be sincere about this, because if you're not sincere, if you try to create this engagement just because you feel like you have to do it,
right,
they know it, they sense it. It has to be authentic. But people, many of us, we can't get to that place of authenticity or to be able to show authenticity until we've embraced it ourselves and felt okay with it and gone through that uncomfortable feeling. And it's like sticking your toe in the water, and little bit by little bit you start to say, oh, that's not that bad. Oh, I don't know that I can get the whole team together and ask them questions and not have to have the answers. That's really overwhelming for some people. But when they start to do it and they start to see how, wow, I never thought about that, I never considered that option, wow, he has a great idea, she's got a fantastic idea, it opens up their mind slowly.
I worked with a VP some months ago, maybe 4 months into lockdown, and they were saying how, in chatting with their wife, there was this discussion around, when do you think he'll go back to traveling? Because as a VP, he had a huge region and was often traveling around.
Right.
She wasn't that happy about him traveling, mid-50s, fit and healthy, but didn't really want him getting on a plane. And he was saying to me in a session, you know, how do I ask my team to go back and start seeing clients when I don't want to? And I just looked him straight in the eye and I said, well, that is the question. How do you?
Mm.
And through conversation, he actually ended up running a team meeting the following week where he laid the question out on the table saying, guys, I'm really struggling with the thought of getting back on a plane. And I can't ask any of you to do that unless I was prepared to. I'd love to know what you're thinking. I want to understand where you're all at when it comes to.
Yeah.
And it was so fascinating because they all want client and customer engagement, but less than 30% of them want to get on a plane and travel.
Mm.
And so there was this sort of, you know, not only a dilemma of, okay, we need to work out what that means for the business, but it then actually created a whole conversation around kind of futurist thinking around what they can do with their clients and customers if they're not going to travel for 6, 9, 10 months.
Right.
And it all came from their leader sharing what was going on in his heart and being open and vulnerable and totally authentic.
Yes, totally authentic. And that is a great example, and how powerful for him to have embraced that.
Yeah.
It might have been scary at the moment, but you know what? When you don't have the answers, it's okay to say that, right? Help me figure this out. What are your ideas? I really don't know. I have a few ideas, but I want to hear your ideas first.
Right. And, you know, they say, don't they, that leaders need to speak less, but actually, I think it's Simon Sinek argued that leaders need to speak last. Because so often, you know, they come into the boardroom and it's like, right, guys, here's the problem. This is what I think we should do, but I'd love to know your view. And instantly in that moment, you just shot everyone down.
Everybody, they've all closed.
Correct.
Right? The doors have closed. The receptivity is done. I say to leaders, 2 ears, 1 mouth. Listen twice as much as you speak. Let's start with that.
My father used to say that to me while he was clipping me around the head as a young boy.
You know, some of this is so simple, it is really profound. But we think we have to be the one speak. I said, ask questions. Don't make statements. Ask questions. They engage. Question brings somebody to you. The statement pushes them away, just like you described. You come in the boardroom. Okay, we're doing this, 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 and this. I want to know what you think. No, you don't. If you did, you wouldn't have come out with all of that.
But then to your point, how do leaders respond when you talk to them about connecting with their heart? Because it sounds softer, it sounds more impassioned. It's not corporate speak as we know it.
It's not. No, it's absolutely not. Oh, they don't get it right away. So I'll give them an article. I'll share some information. We might. You mentioned Simon Sinek, right? We have one of the books that we might read together through the coaching program, which is powerful, and it highlights the great difference between the organizations that have the heart and the ones that don't.
Yeah.
And how I said, you know, you're tired of filling this position all the time. You're tired of filling the finance manager role or the commercial director role. What if you didn't have this turnover? What if you had somebody that truly was engaged and worked well in the organization? Can you imagine? Oh, it'd be a game changer. Well, are you willing to consider an option? Because a lot of times people don't leave. They leave because of a bad boss, or they leave because they don't feel valued and appreciated. Okay, maybe there's that offer they can't refuse. Maybe. But many times there's that offer that they probably couldn't refuse or shouldn't refuse, but they do because they really enjoy where they are.
Yeah, because if you can create that sense of belonging, that commitment, along with an alignment to whatever the goals and aspirations are to those team members, you'll create a loyalty that you can't put a price on.
Right.
And
it's so productive.
Yeah, you're right about leaders as well, because with the status comes all the kind of decorations, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. I remember seeing an interview with Colin Powell. I think he was on Letterman, something like that, right? And he was talking about, you know, when he was in office, he was a 4-star general. So wherever he went, you know, people would don their caps to him. And of course, later on in life, when he left the world and the political stage, he's traveling on a train in, economy class with everybody else, pulling his bag along the platform. No
Right.
one's going, "Oh, Mr. Powell, Mr. Powell," and just in listening to that story, you could sense the humility of this individual, who had led people into, ultimately, some of them, their death. The weighted responsibility.
Sure.
And, I wonder, perhaps there are certain roles where heart-based leadership is really important. And it seems as though today, in the pandemic world we live in, maybe it's an opportunity for leaders to really connect whilst we're so digitally hyper-connected, but physically disconnected, to go down this route. You touched on communication before. Is it all about communication? Is it as simple as that?
I believe it is. I mean, I think, of course, you need to be able to prioritize and strategize and do all of that, manage your time. But at the end of the day, if you don't connect and communicate with your team and create an environment where there's open communication, where there's two-way communication, things aren't going to work. Or they might work, but they're certainly not going to work to the best degree possible or to their highest potential. And we've seen around the world, communication can separate, it can bring people together, it can create, it can destroy. How are we going to use it, or how are we going to not use communication, the power of communication? And if people aren't machines. And the one leader that I do work with in manufacturing environment, very good with process and operations and machines, manufacturing.
Right.
It's all about efficiency, but people are not machines. And we all have a heart. So let's connect as much as we can with that person and make it memorable. And as you said, it creates a loyalty that you can't fabricate.
And I suppose what that means is that we've got to maybe think more about the process rather than the outcome.
Yeah.
Worry less about the number.
Right. And trust that the numbers will happen,
right,
if we get the process right.
Yeah. And it seems as though it doesn't matter what you do, people are less interested in the process than they are in the product.
Oh, they want results.
Right. Because that's
they want the result. And we all do. I want that too. But the process is more important. It's kind of like weight loss, right? If we want to change our physique, we want to get to that number. Yeah, but how? What actions are we going to do it? Because every single day. What actions every single day? You were saying earlier, you're a long distance runner, right? And if you don't, you start to get those, like that anxiety almost. You got to, right? Start shaking. So what is it that if the person is going to put exercise into their routine and they're going to change their diet to support the goal of the weight loss, it has to be ongoing. The same with this. It's not, you can't have a performance review once a year or twice a year and expect that is the engagement that is necessary for your team, particularly in this environment where people are at home.
Yeah.
Working in an environment that could be their kitchen table, right? That maybe they live in a 1-bedroom apartment and it was never designed to be an office.
No, I mean, people have said to me, I'm not working
very hard
at work.
Yeah.
And maybe that's one of, you started off, maybe this helps us come full circle actually, because you kind of started off by saying, we're all for the first time ever going through an experience where we kind of know what other people are experiencing. I've talked about global empathy during the pandemic. I know it's not the same storm for everybody. It looks different depending on where you are, how you live, etc. Of course, I'm not belittling that, but the ability to empathize with our neighbor
absolutely
has never been had a light shone on it so brightly than in the last 8-9 months. And maybe to your point, we could really use this opportunity to communicate with the thing that most of us are missing the most, which is that heart, because that's where the sense of belonging comes, that sense of love and care,
all of it.
Yeah,
right. The meaning, the significance. And I'll reference a company here. I don't do work with them, but I used to be in the airline business for almost 25 years. Southwest Airlines is an airline that talks about they have on their airplane and they have on their their advertising, without a heart, it's just a machine, referring to the airplane and everything that they do. Their ticker symbol on the stock market is LUV, for love. I mean, they're all about heart and all about caring for their people. Of course, it's an airline, so at the end of the day, you're going to have various degrees of satisfaction with the
Sure.
with because it's a business based on variables. But at their core, it's a business based on caring and compassion and connecting. And that's powerful, because you remember that and you think, wow, yeah, every other 737 out there is a 737 airplane, 2 engines, but they talk about it having a heart. And on their planes, they have a heart on the bottom of the fuselage.
Yeah, and kind of what drives it. I love that. And
right. It's like, what's behind it?
Yeah. There's a client I work with in medical and security services, and their ethos is worldwide reach, human touch.
Love it.
And in those 4 words, everything about how they do business, ultimately they save lives. And whether it's on the security side in protecting people, or the medical side in physically saving a life of someone who's poorly, that's what they do. But they do it with that human touch.
Yeah.
And
that's what matters.
Right. Because if you don't subscribe to those values, you don't join, or you don't fit.
Right. And that's what you remember, right? You don't remember the bottom line. You don't remember the result. You remember, oh, that was a really pleasant experience of working with that company or working with that person.
Right.
That was that person. They made me feel good. I heard somebody say recently that, he hates going to functions. Well, now it doesn't matter, but they're all virtual, but where there has to be a lot of small talk. So he'll just ask questions to the person. The person's like, it was great talking to you. Well, he never said anything.
Right.
He didn't say anything, but they remember that because he listened, and that's what matters. Listen twice as much as we speak. Let's build that connection step by step. Yeah, it's uncomfortable as hell in the beginning. It really is. But they start to realize, they start to soften up slowly and realize, wow, there's something behind this. I don't have nearly as much stress as I had before, and I'm getting better results. How am I doing this? Because you're letting go a little bit.
So Maya Angelou was right. People don't remember what you say. They remember how you feel.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Scott Masciarelli, I think we've come full circle. What a pleasure and a joy to talk heart-centered leadership with you. Carry on coaching. Be safe and well over the Christmas period. And we'll get you back once we start this coaching program in the new year. We'll get you back on, and we'll dive a bit deeper into this heart-centered stuff, see if we can't help some leaders find a path to tap into that themselves.
Excellent.
Real pleasure. Take care. Thank you so much. See you soon.
Thank you. See you. Bye-bye.